Hello again. Welcome to Session 5, Chapter 5, where we are going to look at leaders as churchmen. Leaders at church as churchmen. It's here that we're actually going to talk really about the form of government that the PCA utilizes in its care for the local church, the presbyteries, and ultimately the denomination. We're going to talk about how the leaders of the church participate in all three of these courts and what powers these courts even have. First and foremost, I think we need to understand that Christ is the head of the church. That's what Colossians 1 teaches us, that Christ is the head of the church. And then our preface to our Book of Church Order says that from the throne room of heaven, as head of the church, he executes his offices as prophet, priest, and king through the ministry of elders and deacons. And so as prophets, the leaders of the church proclaim the good news of the gospel. They teach, they guard the pulpit. As priests, they intercede in prayer for the people of God in their local church context. And then as king, they actually lead. They have dominion over the church. Especially with the elders, as we practice church discipline and promoting the peace and purity of the church, we are executing that office of the king. And so when we are churchmen, that means that we are involved not only in the local level, but also the presbytery level and the denominational level. The church is, of course, made up of people, and we have the Church of First Presbyterian Church, and then we have the Church of PD Presbytery, and then we have the church as represented with the Presbyterian Church in America, our denomination. And so, as people join our local church, it's our opportunity to lead them and to care for them, executing Christ's offices as prophet, priest, and king. But also, our job does not stop with the local church level. It actually carries over into what we call the presbytery. Now, the presbytery, if you are familiar with kind of Baptist polity, is a lot like a regional association. It is a regional collection of churches, usually by some sort of geographical bound. First Presbyterian Church is a member of the PD Presbytery, and our bounds are from Dillon. And then you can go all the way down 95 to Manning. Then you go east to Myrtle Beach, all the way west to Sumter. And so this upper kind of northeastern quadrant of South Carolina is our presbytery. That's the bounds in which we commit ourselves to the work of this geographic location. Just to tell you a little bit about our presbytery, we have 19 churches. Around 32, 33 teaching elders. And so at presbytery meetings, which meet once a quarter, those teaching elders come together alongside of ruling elders from the local churches to make decisions regarding our geographical area. Presbyteries really serve as a system of accountability to ensure churches are being led properly by their elders, to ensure that appropriate doctrine is being taught, to discuss and debate issues within the church, to make rulings and judgments against members even of our local churches if it comes to that point in church discipline. It's really there for prayer, care, oversight, and advice, as you see on page 36 of your spiral book. And so when you have a teaching elder, like myself, I'm a teaching elder, I have membership in the Church of PD Presbytery. That is, quote unquote, my church. My membership falls within them, and ultimately I am responsible to that presbytery as well. Our church gets to send two ruling elders alongside of our teaching elders. And so at the presbytery level and ultimately the General Assembly level, we are responsible for 4 votes. And those votes are very important because when the Book of Church Order is being amended or when there's a controversy within the presbytery or denomination. Those 4 votes really matter. And so it is important for our leaders, especially our elders who get to be voting delegates at presbytery and general assembly, to attend these meetings alongside of the teaching elders to ensure that we are utilizing all of our votes. The General Assembly is, of course, the highest court of the Presbyterian Church in America, and it represents all the churches that fall within that denomination, our denomination. And so we send representatives, any teaching elder the church might have, and ruling elders according to church size. Again, we have 2. And we come together annually to receive and issue all appeals, references, and complaints, to discuss proposed amendments to the Book of Church Order, to make decisions in controversies respecting doctrine and discipline, to review the records of our presbyteries, and to devise measures of promoting the prosperity and enlargement of the church. And so the creation of new presbyteries would fall up underneath the General Assembly, where the creation of new churches would fall under the bounds of a presbytery, a regional collection of elders. Now, of course, the Presbyterian Church in America is a grassroots denomination, and so everything comes from bottom to top. The General Assembly is not allowed to begin to hand down orders or even amendments to our Book of Church Order, but they all have to come through sessions, through presbyteries, and into the General Assembly from bottom to top. Even with something like an amendment to the Book of Church Order that we would call an overture. An overture originates from a session. It goes to presbytery. That presbytery gets to discuss and amend and vote it up and down. And so if it's voted in the affirmative, I had to make sure I knew how to say this. If it's voted in the affirmative, it's sent to General Assembly. If it's voted in affirmative there, it will be sent back down to presbyteries, where presbyteries will again discuss and vote it up or down. And if it's voted in the affirmative again, it goes back to a General Assembly. And so really an amendment to the Book of Church Order is, 1, rare, but 2, about a 2-year, at minimum, a 2-year process to ensure that it's a grassroots process. And now when we come into the PCA as a whole, the Constitution of the PCA is the Westminster Confession of Faith, larger and shorter catechisms, in our Book of Church Order. The Bible is not included as a constitutional document because we believe, just as Christ is the head of the church, our creeds and confessions and our order is all subject to the Word of God, our Bibles. And so our Bibles stand at the forefront. We're going to do ministry as regulated by the Word. And then we have our confessions, our creeds, our catechisms, and our Book of Church Order, which all can be amended, actually, while we hold that the Bible cannot be. And of course, that is one of the main differences between us as now a PCA congregation and what we used to be a PCUSA congregation. The PCUSA began to slip in their understanding of what the Scriptures are. They held the creeds and the confessions to be parallel in power and authority with the Bible. And so they began to allow people to take exceptions with the Word of God or even attempt to amend the Word of God. And so we had many different issues coming up in the late 60s and through the 70s and even into the 80s, where women were being ordained as elders and deacons, practicing homosexuals who were being ordained to church office, and there was teaching against the supernatural work of Christ throughout the Gospels. And so in the early 80s, First Presbyterian Church pulled out of the PCUSA and joined the PCA. Well, what is the vision of the PCA? It's on page 41 and 42 of your spiral books, and you can read through them for us or with us. But the kind of the mantra of the PCA is that we're committed to 3 things: the right preaching of the Word, to the discipleship of the believers, and to the Great Commission. So we're going to evangelize, we're going to bring them into the church, we're going to grow them up in the church, and then ultimately we're going to send them out to proclaim the word into the church. And so that is really our staple of our vision within the PCA. Now, according to exercises, I want you to read Exhibit E, which is a synopsis of the Book of Church Order that I wrote for you. And then, of course, write down any questions that you might have. Continue in your reading. It's very important that you try to get through that reading. And then we'll see you for chapter and session 6 soon. Thank you.